Direct from Montreal, Canada, this is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone from the band Megadeth, it is David Ellefson. He has some exclusive news for you today, so do check that out. And I have a bunch of interviews sitting in the can. Zakk Wylde, Seether, Mark LaFrance, Charm City Devils, Desmond Child, Peter Noone, Doro, Dean Castronovo, David Glenn Isley, and a bunch more. And on my socials, I asked folks, should I do 2, 3, 4 guests an episode or just stick to one and just put out a few more episodes? So overwhelmingly, folks said, Mitch, just stick to one. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have David Ellefson, and tomorrow you will have Zakk Wylde, and we'll get to the other ones later. Now, over the Christmas break, my kids are home from school for 2 weeks, so I will be home with them. So what I will do is most likely try to pump out sort of one episode a day during that time period, just to sort of fill the void of me just sort of sitting here doing nothing, which, hey, it's a great thing. But I think that's what I'll do is I'll release those episodes as a Christmas present, I guess. Speaking of Christmas presents, the Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison, and Joan Jett tour went on sale, and Fox 6 News reported that the Miller Park show was the fastest sellout in that park's history. So yeah, you know what? A lot of folks are going, well, stadiums are too big, you know. Fastest sellout in Miller Park history. That's it. That's all you need to say. And I think part of the success of the tour is the supply and demand part of it. 22 shows. That's it. You got to go to one of these 22 shows to see this package. If they had done 60 dates, if they had done, we're going to do, 40 dates in the States and 20 dates in Europe, and then I think people would have been like, all right, well, I'll just wait till it comes to my town and we'll be good. But with this limited supply, it's like, dude, if you want to see this, you're going to have to fly in from wherever you are to go to Boston, to go to the cities, to go to Miller Park, and so on and so forth. So I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised that it sold so well. The other thing in the news that came out that was somewhat disturbing to me was Huey Lewis gave an interview to a publication, I guess, in Montana, unless I'm mistaken. And in that conversation, he revealed that he was suicidal after his hearing loss diagnosis. And he explained that he was contemplating taking a bucket full of pills, and that would be the easiest way to do it. And boy, nothing can make me sadder than to hear that. I mean, there's all kinds of mental health issues that can lead people to suicide and depression. And then there's this with the hearing loss that is so severe that it just drives you nuts that you just want to say, F it, I'm done. And I don't even know how to react to that. It's just incredibly, incredibly sad. From that news coming out, I have been down this rabbit hole of Huey Lewis. My playlist of Huey Lewis music in my phone stands right now at 195 songs, and for the last month or so, I play it all the way through, and then I start back at song 1, and I play it all the way through, and I've even been emailing with one of the band members about different things, and of course, 1983 when Sports came out, that was my world. I mean, that was the album of the year for me. It was the one that I had on repeat every single day. I must have heard those 9 songs in 1983, 1984. I must have heard those 9 songs literally 1,000 times each. I really must have, because I played it, and then I played it again. And because it was such a short album, I just, what was it, 33 minutes or something like that? It was just easy. There is even, and I'm not going to admit this very often, but there is even a video of me at the age of 14 lip syncing to the entire album. It is, with a tennis racket, if I'm not mistaken. It is disturbing. It's really disturbing. But no, I'm not going to put clips of that anywhere. That is going to stay hidden in a vault. and hopefully the tape that it's on will disintegrate over time. I can't throw it out because that's just wrong, but it ain't going to get played anywhere. But anyway, so that's sad news with Huey Lewis. It's such a great guy, such a great band, such a voice. Heart and Soul, for example, which was a cover, and Do You Believe in Love, which was also a cover. When you hear the originals, you go, ooh, okay. And then you hear Huey's voice on them, and you go, Do You Believe in Love's a freaking massive single. And you didn't hear that with the original version. So to lose that voice, and I guess technically we've lost that voice because of the ear thing. He can't record anymore. But anyway, they do have a new album coming out in February, I believe on Valentine's Day, called Weather. And 2 tracks are available now on all the streaming sites and Apple and all that stuff. And I love them. I think it is classic Huey Lewis. So if you love Huey, certainly pick those 2 up. And if you are feeling as devastated as I am by the news that he was contemplating suicide, maybe go over to the Huey Lewis socials and just leave a message of, hey, Huey, we got you. We support you in this. Anyway, on with the show. Here is, without further ado, revealing a new project, an exclusive new project. The first place you're going to hear about it is right here. Here is the one, the only, Megadeth's David Ellefson. We are speaking with Megadeth bassist David Ellefson. As we say in Montreal, toujours un plaisir, always a pleasure. Bonjour, monsieur. How are you?
I am doing well, Mitch. Nice to chat with you, man.
Yeah. So, normally when we get on the phone, we do a whole tell me the history of, and let's focus on Megadeth and what's Megadeth doing. But let's focus on some of the stuff outside of Megadeth here for a bit. You, of course, did the Sleeping Giants album. You have the coffee, you've done the bass clinics, you're doing the second book, but you're also doing movies. Drew Fortier wrote a movie called Dwellers, a horror movie, I guess, for the lack of a better word. Talk to me about sort of expanding the empire, the David Ellefson empire of entertainment. Talk to me.
Sure, yeah. Well, like I said, it started with a record label, then I branched over into coffee, and now we have Ellison Films, which is a production house, very similar, quite honestly, to the EMP label group, where this first film is being created from the ground up. Drew Fortier, who did a documentary film on the band Bang Tango, and then joined Bang Tango for a brief period. Friend of ours, he worked with us at EMP Label Group, behind the scenes stuff, but he's a great guitar player, singer, songwriter, and just a really artistic, cool guy. And he approached me and my partner Tom Hazer just a few months ago, I guess, about this film idea, Dwellers. And the concept of it is that in this small little town, the homeless people, the epidemic's pretty out of control, and then suddenly these homeless people go missing. So Drew puts together a film team to make a documentary movie about the homeless people going missing. And in making that movie, Drew and his cast also go missing. And it's very much, we're calling it in the Blair Witch genre of the kind of home movie footage type of genre. But it's very cool. I mean, when he approached me about it, I didn't know Drew had the aptitude for it, quite honestly. And it was very cool. He's great as an actor. He's got a great concept for writing, and to the degree that he and I are now, I started to write. I wanted to write a fictional book, and I'm kind of breaking news for you. I've never told anybody about this yet, but I've always wanted to write a fictional book because I've written a how-to music business book in the 90s, and then I've written 2 memoirs. And so an idea came to me in a discussion with a friend just literally a couple weeks ago, because I wanted to write fiction. And so the idea came to me, and I think you kind of start with things that are close to home to you. And I hit Drew up, and I said, "Hey, man, I got this idea for a fiction novel concept, kind of an action thriller." And so he and I are actually collaborating now on my first ever fiction novel. And so we've just created the Ellison Books imprint, whereby we can do the same thing. We can either, imprint things up to bigger book publishers. We can, all the way down to self-published stuff. So so we're expanding with Ellison Films, Ellison Books, and Tom Hazard is actually working on a new book with Chris Poland, which is an incredible story because, I think on some level, I think probably me especially, I probably tend to watch what I put in the book because, these are real people that are alive and they've got, history and I'm in Megadeth. Whereas Chris, he had a history before Megadeth, was in Megadeth for a period and then he's not. And his book is exceptionally good. Just the bits of the manuscript that I've seen. And, it's something the Megadeth fans are going to definitely want to read. So,
Wow.
And it's kind of interesting because with the fictional title that I'm writing, I think kind of like John Grisham. I love that he's a lawyer and then he started writing these sort of law adventure thriller books. And I'm doing the same thing. There's probably some things that I can write in my first fictional book that are somewhat autobiographical. But yet, because I'm creating characters and a fictional storyline, you can sort of bring some reality into the characters and even into a little bit of the storyline in a twisted kind of way. So, it's a fun thing. It's a cool thing to be a part of right now.
So, all right, boy, that opens up a can of worms for all kinds of questions. So let me start with this one. Talk to me about it on a creative level. Mm-hmm. Is it something that just sort of, refreshes the creative juices and then eventually it'll lead to, bigger, better Megadeth songs? Is it, ultimately does it come back to the music, or is this a different spark that you haven't done before and it's just going to be a new challenge? And talk to me about it sort of creatively. Does it, I don't want to make it, does it make you youthful in a sense? Does it get you going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. And, I think that they're all very separate. Megadeth is its own entity. Certain songs and concepts and sounds fit within that paradigm. The things that I did with my Ellefson Sleeping Giant solo record, a lot more freedom because it's my first one. So there isn't really sort of a die cast yet for that, other than what people know me for in Megadeth. And I think I already bucked that trend earlier in the year when me and Frank Bello put out our Altitudes and Attitude record. People heard a very different side to me and Frank as two probably well-known thrash metal bass players. They heard an entirely different side to our musical scope with that. So I think people have come to expect that with me. Look, Megadeth's the big gig, and when I'm there, I'm doing that. We learned many years ago in the late '90s, in particular, that when it says Megadeth on that album cover, it needs to sound like Megadeth, and so we keep that certainly special and unique. But over to this film and books, divisions that we've started. With our companies here, I think it's very different in the sense that, when you write a song, you've got a sort of a musical structure in place, and then you put the lyric, and essentially you put the story inside of that music in the form of a lyric, and lyrics have to have a certain cadence, maybe oftentimes a rhyme scheme to them. It's usually some kind of a repetition, especially in a chorus. So there's obviously an art to that. That's a real craft to write a song, especially a song that is successful, that connects with people. But I think when you're writing either a book, and again, autobiographical books, you're telling your life story, but even that has confines and structure to it, in a way that an audience is going to want to read it. What I'm finding writing in a fictional novel, because I read a lot of fiction, it's kind of like when I was growing up with my Kiss and Van Halen and Judas Priest records. I learned how to do Megadeth based on what I saw my heroes do, right? And I think writing the books and doing the film is very similar. We've got our heroes who have gone before us. For me, probably again, everything from Grisham to Dean Koontz and all that stuff in the fiction realm that I like, that I've read in the past. And of course, in the film thing, it could be everything from Pulp Fiction to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, depending on the genre you want to go in. But I think there's what's fun about it is that when it's new to us, like it is for me and Drew and Tom, we also can kind of be free of maybe some of the standards that are set, and that's very freeing. It's like we can kind of dream up whatever we want and cast the line in the water and really get the
well, that's got to be
tank.
rewarding in a sense that you're right. When you're within Megadeth or the Megadeth paradigm, you sort of have to have a certain lyric or a certain song structure. You can't, come in with a flowery country song, so right. So
right. And to that end, I think Dave and I, we're very hard on ourselves because, we've got, like, right now we're working on album 16. So we're very careful never to repeat any lyric. And sometimes it's only a couple of words, it's like, now we use that, something like that in High Speed Dirt, oh no, we use something like that back on, Last Rites Love to Death. You know what I mean? So you tend to be, as you go on, it's not like that creative process gets more wide, it gets more narrow because, even if we have a riff pattern, and we move notes around within a riff, we're like, nope, can't do that. We already did that back on, album 3, or nope, we can't do that. There's a song in Dystopia that's got that same exact chord pattern movement to it, So in a lot of ways, your first album, your first book, your first movie, I guess in this case, are sometimes the most rewarding. And maybe, look, I never thought about it until you and me just having this conversation right now. That may be one of the reasons why I find these ventures so exciting and so creatively rewarding, because there really is no confines. They're brand new, and it's as the saying goes, you've got your whole life to write your first album and about 9 months to write your second one,
And that's what I was getting at with the earlier question, because if you weren't doing this other stuff and day in, day out, it was just Megadeth, after all these years, there would be, I guess, a creative exhaustion where you just go, all right, we're going to go make album 16. But this is sort of the renouveau where you go, okay, we'll go do 16, but I'm going to write this movie, and I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to come up with new coffee flavors, and I'm going to do... And I think that's what keeps it... Is that sort of... How can I put this? Is that sort of the key to a successful career and a successful music career, is to have, I don't want to say distractions, but other interests that sort of keep the main thing fresh and rewarding when you do come back to it?
Guys, this is like sitting on the couch at the psychiatrist's office right now, Mitch.
Wow.
I've really never had these conversations, but it's funny. I should probably be paying you $200.
Listen, I did do a master's in psychology, so perhaps,
I can tell. You're Bob Newhart. I can tell. You got it. But it's, you're probably right. I mean, in my, latest memoir, The More Life with Death book, I think the overarching theme of that is just say yes to life. When Mitch calls, do the interview. When, Megadeth calls, we need to write a record, go write a record. When Tom calls and says, hey, let's put together a solo album, sure, no problem, And I've learned to do that because I think when you say yes to life, it's more fun, and it just opens up these endless possibilities. And it's lack of a better pun, I guess, is, you throw lines in the water, you're bound to catch more fish, and it isn't so much for what you're going to get out of it, but what you continue to give, and that's kind of a, maybe a little bit of a different paradigm, because I find that when you're giving and giving and giving, look, the good Lord gave each of us a talent, whatever that may be, and some special gifts to do things. And, if you just keep them to yourself, it's kind of a dim light, and I think when you just continue to push those forward, and especially when you can connect with other people, because that, let's face it, I mean, the songs you and I grew up with that, we talk about to this day, I see you post stuff on Facebook. So does Monty Connor from Nuclear Blast. He posts different album covers of records I grew up on. And it's funny how, when we post these things, it pulls us together. We go, oh man, I like that too. I like that too. And which album? Oh, album 3. Oh man, I love that one. That's my favorite too. And this community that we build. And I think now more than ever, because of the social media aspect, we can communicate to each other around the world with so many different people over, our favorite album, our favorite movie, our favorite book. And so to me, the collaborative spirit is always important to me, and even in these companies that we have, it's nice that we've got these, we're a team, it's funny. I watched that Jerry Seinfeld, that YouTube thing that he's got, that, comedians in cars getting coffee. And I've really come to appreciate a few comedians. Seth Rogen is one that I didn't watch his movies that much. And then suddenly I saw him on that, and I had a real appreciation for who he is, his comedy style, and that, he goes to work every day in his office and they dream up ideas, and then they turn them into movies and things like that. And he stars in them and writes them, and, he's got a big piece in it. And I really have been thinking about that a lot, because that's kind of what our world is over here in the EMP land, the Ellison empire, as Tom calls it, the EMP ire, is that's what it is. It's just a team. We're on the phone every day. We're constantly brainstorming, thinking. Ideas come to us at all hours of the day and night. We call, we text, we email, and we've even got my Andy Martingelli, my guitar player from over in Italy, who did my Sleeping Giants tour over there. I've got him tasked to be the musical director on a handful of things for me now. We're actually working on a couple of new songs for some new Ellison solo songs. And, so I like that our world is really wide and there's a lot of people in it. And I think, that's how every big company, Universal, MGM, and otherwise, they started with a couple of dudes with an idea, and then it just grew from there. And I like that. I like to feel that we're big, we're wide in the sense that it's inclusive to a lot of people bringing their ideas into it.
Yeah, and so when you head up the podcasting division, I'll take care of that. But no,
exactly, Ellison podcast, you'll be hired.
I'll be hired. But I got to ask you this, just real quick on the book writing. Is that with the sense of I want to do one book and put it in a feather in my cap and I'm done? Is it about creating a series, like a Nancy Drew or something, where you're going to have the same characters or the same sort of storyline come back over and over in 3, 4, 5 books? Is it separate books?
It's more of that. In fact, I'd say what it is. It's funny, again, I use the John Grisham thing because you kind of start close to home with what you know. And I followed Grisham books for, most of his writing career, starting with The Firm, probably, and it hit me. It's like, this is very clever. This is his world. He knows. He's very trained in this. And yet now he's stepping out and he's, retired lawyer. He's writing fiction. And so he kept it close to home. So this first book concept is, I was talking to a friend. He goes, man, you're always gone. You're always around the world. It's like you're a secret agent. And I thought, fuck, that's a great idea. Like, kid from the Midwest goes to Hollywood, becomes a rock star. And, little as you know, he's signing a deal with the devil, which is basically what the music business is anyway. And while he gets to be rich and famous being a rock star, now he has to go, his day job is to kill people for the agency. And I was just like, man, what a fucking great idea. So I got to work on it. And, that's that. And it's funny as the concept goes, which has a double entendre to it, because a lot of what we do in life is, if I'm only over there, if I can only achieve that, everything will be great. But in order to achieve that, you always sell a little piece of your soul and a little piece of your life in exchange for some bigger prize, And what I like about writing a book that I'm really finding fascinating. I mean, I'm in it every day. I wake up, I write, I go to bed, I'm writing. And what I love about it is that the twists and the turns, and that's why Drew is a great collaborator with me, because we've kind of agreed upon some characters, a storyline, and agreed upon the voice of it, and the voice of the main character. And it is that. I mean, man, you can take the story, go down all these different twists and turns that you could never do that in a song, because a song's too short. And I think the lyric, the timeline to develop the idea is shorter in a song. With a book, it's kind of limitless, And if the idea is too big for one book, you can stop and then create a sequel. And of course, now that we have the film company, I'm thinking, and Drew and I agree that as we write this first book, we think, okay, let's also be thinking screenplay and where the edit points are in this that we could eventually turn this into a film. So,
see, you just took my next question. I was actually going to ask you about are these eventually to be screenplays? So I guess in a sense, yes. And by the way, when you said you're like a CIA agent, suddenly I had this dream of, the next Bond series is going to be about a rock band that goes around the world touring, but they're actually secret agents.
I'm telling you, man.
I'm trademarking that.
I'm writing the book now. Trust me. And I'm just, I'm being very transparent. I'm just even putting the idea out there for everybody to hear. But again, it's very kind of this action thriller, almost horror. But back to something that I know, and again, it's not about me, obviously, but again, the kind of the Grisham concept, you sort of start with what and I think that was probably the frustrating thing as I thought about writing fiction. I was sort of reaching out into the abyss of something that I had no context around, you know what I mean? So when I was chatting with my buddy a couple weeks ago, and he was just mentioning this secret agent thing, I was like, God, that's the perfect thing, because what a great disguise. Like hiding in plain sight, hiding as a famous guy, and yet having, dirty deeds done dirt cheap on the side, so, it's sort of, there's a lot of fun with it. I see it being it's turning into a very cool rock and roll book. It'll be fun to read for the rock and roll people. And you kind of almost don't know where the autobiographical and the fantasy sort of ends at certain times. So it's a lot of fun to,
that's great,
to explore this. Yeah.
I love that. And listen, we said we're going to do 20 minutes today because we've done many of these. We don't need to do the history of, but, sure. News came out recently that you're going to sing on a Megadeth album. So I'm assuming that's true. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Is that something that excites you, something that scares you? Does it?
No, I honestly, Mitch, I'm excited that Dave's excited about it because, we run a lot of ideas past each other and you never know which ones are going to stick, and I was, we were working up until about the end of July on the Megadeth album, and then we just had to shut things down so Dave could go into his cancer treatments, and we're throwing a lot of ideas, and you can feel like, okay, these 3 or 4 over here are really taking shape. This is developing. You got there's a couple of stragglers over there, and right as I departed from the session to get back home, and then I set out on my solo tour and everything. Dave and I really found a connection there, and I realized, and I even said to him, I said, man, you don't need me to sit here and write riffs. It's like you're like one of the best riff writers in the world. Like literally, that's Dave's sweet spot, is just writing the most just killer riffs. So you don't need me to do that. And in fact, some of the best contributions I've done to Megadeth have been lyrical ideas. Like Dave and we saw that lyric when in 1986 we went home to my home in Minnesota. I took Dave back to the farm in Jackson on our way from L.A. out to New York City, where the label bidding wars and began for us, and we ended up on Capitol, of course, out of that. But I took him back there, and we were watching TV one night, and it was after this whole farming crisis thing had happened, and on the TV one night there was a show, and it was called Foreclosure of a Dream, and we held on to that for 5 years before we actually wrote the lyric, and we were on the Judas Priest tour, on the Painkiller tour, doing our Rust in Peace, tour. And we were in St. Paul at the Civic Center, and so this would have been the fall of 1990. Dave picks up his guitar in the dressing room, and he starts playing that riff for Foreclosure of a Dream, that right? And we started to develop that, and a couple months later, he saw me. I was reading a book, a Robert Heinlein, like a sci-fi book, and it was called Farmer in the Sky. And, again, I know that subject, so I guess kind of on our theme here of this podcast of talking about, these new endeavors and, starting close to home, the farming thing I knew. So Dave said, he goes, you know what, why don't we call that song Foreclosure of a Dream, and then why don't you write the lyric around it, since it's about, you've lived that. That's your family. That's you and your family. You've lived that life, So so that was where that started. So, Dave and I will have these very just random connections on things. And this, this one for me to sing, when we were starting to write the record, he said it. He goes, you know what? I think this album, you need to sing a song on your own. You need to write it by yourself, and you need to sing it by yourself. And it should be your song. And, I've read those Kiss books, so I always go back to Ace Frehley in his book when he talked about when Gene and Paul made him sing Shock Me. Because he used to write songs and he'd have Gene and Paul sing them, and one day they said, no, you're singing it. And I guess that's where I'm at. I'm here. I used to sing all the time in my bands growing up. Dave became obviously the singer of Megadeth kind of by default, because we couldn't find a singer. So he was writing the lyrics. So he became the singer. And on my Bay Story Sleeping Giants tours that I've been doing around the world this year, I've been singing a lot. A couple songs, If You Were God, and another song, Feel Your Pain. That was actually an F5 song that I composed the music to. Were in my vocal range. And so I stepped up and just started singing. I like singing. It's fun. I like bass player singers, whether it's Gene Simmons, McCartney, Sting, Phil Lynott. I like that because you can tell that they were the writers as well. When you're a writer, and I think it makes it a lot easier to be the singer too.
Well, and I find it interesting because you look at there's sort of two kinds of bands. There's bands like the Beatles and Kiss and all that where sort of every member has a voice, and then there are bands where like AC/DC or Metallica, whatever, and it's just the one guy doing the one voice. Megadeth was sort of that, and now you're adding this extra layer and this extra flavor, and it's going to be interesting. And who knows? Hopefully, it'll lead to more extra layers and extra flavors, and why not?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was very thrilled when Dave brought it up. I was going, you sure? But he really kept pushing on it, and so I was happy to, when I saw that he was talking about it publicly, I was like, wow, this is very cool. So,
write your own Beth, I think is what he said.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is. It's kind of a ballady. It's funny. It just started from this little riff I wrote, and he just loved this little riff. He goes, man, it's brilliant. Like that's just amazing. And then I sat down and started working on it, and developed the music. And one day I just sat in his office and at his house in Nashville, and I said, hey, I got this idea that came to me last night. And I just sat there with the acoustic guitar and I sang it. And I think that's what inspired it. It was like, wow, okay, you've got a grasp of the whole thing here. And that's one thing I learned with Dave is I would bring him a lyric and he would always ask, what's it about? And it's like, if I had to think about it, then the idea wasn't done, and you should be able to explain it in, really in about one sentence, like the new book. What's your new book about? It's about a rock star becomes a secret agent and goes kills some people. All right, good. I like it. So it's, if you can explain it in one sentence, then you have a grasp of what the idea is as the author.
Well, let's hope he never asks Joe Elliott to explain Pour Some Sugar on Me. Razzle, little dazzle, video, vamp. Like, what are you saying there, Joe?
Well, isn't it? Well, it's either that or the lyric or the title is so self-explanatory that it needs no explanation. Right. I guess. Right.
There you go.
Well, hopefully that's the answer Joe would give us. So
right.
Really, you have to ask.
Well, he is my interview next week, so I will ask him what he. But on that, we are at 25 minutes, so let us wrap this up. We will do another part at some point, but just the last thing is these projects, these books. We're sort of aiming for 2020, but it might go to 2021. That's sort of what I'm feeling, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Dwellers film is just being, like, the edits are done. There's a couple little, still got to go through and do some balance work on the, I mean, there's still mixing to do. Probably what prompted it is it was a work in motion, and we were excited to talk about it. And I did an appearance, and I invited Drew to come with me to do an appearance up at the Niagara Falls Comic-Con, or the HorrorCon, I guess it was, up there in, when was that, late October. And, I appear at some of these conventions, and I thought, for a change, rather than me just coming in as, like, famous music guy, it's like, let me come in and bring some, like, an actual horror asset to the convention, sort of walk in and bring my own film, which opens up, of course, Q&A and banter and, development of further ideas. But yeah, for the actual distribution of it will definitely be 2020. As far as the books, yeah, I mean, look, the fiction thing is a whole new, that's a whole new hallway for me. So that's going to take what it takes. I'm pretty experienced with the, autobiographical memoir stuff. I'd like to think the Chris Poland book, hopefully we can get that out, 2020, I hope. By the time we turn the calendar, I'm sure there's going to be some more stuff going on here. And Megadeth, of course, we've got the tour starting up in January here with Five Finger Death Punch and Bad Wolves over in Europe. And then we're going to get hunkered back down again in Nashville this spring to dig back into the record. And, like I've always said, that record will be done when it's done. I mean, it's an important record. We started it, and then of course a lot has happened, and Dave's, cancer recovery. There's some big things that have happened during the making of this record that I'm sure will have an impact on the final outcome and maybe some of the lyric ideas and just a lot of stuff. So, I think a great record, in order for it to really connect with people, it's got to be heartfelt and all that. And the heart of it has certainly, it's been in a transitional process just during the recording. So, that'll come out when it's ready.
As it should, by the way, because you're at this point in your career where, first of all, you can't afford to have a dud, because then you're just like, oh, the old band made a dud, and oh my God, they've lost it, and you don't. And you're also at a point where you have a catalog where it's like, listen, we're either going to add to this catalog if it's good enough, or we're just not. And either way, you win. So, and the fans win, because you don't have that pressure by the record company to rush out, 9 shitty songs that weren't finished. Now you can just go, it'll be great and perfect when it's great and perfect. And that's when you get it. And that's great.
That's exactly right. Yep. That is exactly right.
Gone are the days of the sophomore album where they like, oh, you got to hurry up. Come on. Nope.
Yeah. Nope. We've done that a couple times, the two, it's funny, the two records that I, historically looking back that we rushed to sort of stay on a tour cycle were Risk and Super Collider. And I think they're the two records that had the softest response from the fans. Once people got into the records, they realized they were cool records, but first impressions are everything. And so it's, look, we've got a lot of stuff lined up and good stuff. And the first thing is, now Dave's starting to, publicly discuss, where he's at with his health and his recoveries and everything. And that's moving along well. But, it's, there's a human element to all this stuff too, that you don't really think about when you're young, because you don't think you're ever you don't think about your mortality or your health and all this stuff. So you just go. And then one day, you kind of, your attitude is, oh, we'll deal with it later. And then one day later shows up, and, I think this was definitely a bit of a bell ringer for all of us. It's like, whoa, yeah. And I got to be honest with you, Mitch, it's one of the reasons why I just say yes and move forward. You don't always know the outcome. You don't know what lies ahead. And, when I was there, I talked about it in my More Life with Death book. I was there with my mother when she passed away, it was a beautiful moment. She brought me into the world. I got to be there with her as she left this world. And it was a beautiful moment. It wasn't a sad thing at all. And it really hit me. It's like, okay, you know what, now more than ever, it's just go, we're only here for a while, and it's the good Lord gave us these talents and gifts, and it's a real shame if we don't use them for the things he wants us to use them for. So off we go. Yeah.
See, so perfect. And on that, ooh, look at that. Some Huey Lewis started in the background there. Don't ask me why. But on that, sir, as we say,
I want a new drug.
But actually, you know what? I would suggest, and talking about this, just real quick here, I just got to find the reference. But they put out a new song called "While We're Young." Huey Lewis just put out a new song called "While We're Young." Take 5 minutes to go listen to the lyrics, because it's actually, it sort of speaks to our age and what we're doing. There's one line in there where he says, we're going to tell the kids that we're going to go out, but we also have to tell them that we're going to need time to recuperate after it. There's sort of this tongue-in-cheek about, yeah, we're still young and vibrant, but we're also not young and vibrant. And it talks about, we keep saying we'll have more time when we really... Anyway,
I'll give it a listen. I love Huey Lewis. I think he's super cool, man. I like him.
And I think lyrically you're gonna. It's called While We're Young. I think lyrically you're gonna go. That is fucking brilliant. That is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I say that every day. Hey, while we're young, you know what I mean? And because I probably like you, probably like a lot of your listeners, like I just turned 55 this year. I feel like I'm probably 35. I used to think I was 25, but it's it catches up with you a little bit. But again, it's just great to just go, and look, creativity never stops. It doesn't stop until the day we leave the planet. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing, regardless of our physical capabilities, you can always, as long as the mind is sharp, you can keep creating and keep going. And that's why we have these conversations.
Yep. Yes, sir. And on that, merci beaucoup. I could ask you 20 more questions about Sword and about all this, but
yeah,
we said
on the next one.
On the next, we said 15. We're at 35. So
there you go.
So
we're right on schedule.
Exactly.
Perfect. I love it.
Merci, monsieur. Bonsoir. Good night. Have a good night.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
This has been Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. For more exclusive content and interviews, subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and many more. Follow Mitch on all the socials, especially Twitter, @Mitch Lafon, and on Instagram, @Mitch_Lafon. Get your Mitch merch now at loudtracks.com/Mitch.